authored by Mike Krieger via Liberty Blitzkrieg blog. In the first two installments of this series, I discussed the potential for the US federal government to make some spectacularly foolish moves against its own people in the realms of cannabis and Bitcoin. My basic assumption is that government tends to despise freedom, and that leaders of an empire in decline, like the US, are particularly vulnerable to very bad decisions. Government propagandists constantly instruct the public that they need to be fearful of their neighbors as some guy in a cave overseas who they probably funded in the first place, when they themselves tend to be the most unethical, corrupt thieves of all. It's a very clever scam. If you want to ban Bitcoin because of money laundering, crime and violence, we should really ban government first. Mike Krieger at Liberty Blitz December 6, 2017. With that in mind, today's post will zero in on what I consider to be the greatest threat to world peace going into 2018. While I remain unsure as to what the US government may attempt when it comes to cannabis and Bitcoin, I'm far more concerned about the prospects of Donald Trump entangling this nation in an escalating and increasingly disastrous conflict in the Middle East. The signs are everywhere, and it's all becoming very obvious. In fact, I've probably written more articles on this topic than any other in 2017. Rather than rehash everything I've already said, below are links to my October the series on the matter. Empire-destroying wars are coming to America under Trump. Part 1. Empire-destroying wars are coming to America under Trump. Part 2. Empire-destroying wars are coming to America under Trump. Part 3. Confrontation with Iran has been the holy grail of neocons for decades, but it's become increasingly likely under Trump, as I detailed above. Since I wrote those articles, the situation has only escalated, and Trump has decided to attach himself even more clearly to the hip of crazed Saudi princeling Mohammed bin Salman MBS and Israel. It's become obvious that Trump sees both Israel and Saudi Arabia as direct extensions of the US, and is quite willing to sacrifice his own country to protect their position. In prior posts, I spent most of my time focused on why I thought Trump would go in such a non-MAGA direction. Today's post will focus on why I think it'll be such a historical failure. Conventional wisdom says that a dedicated alliance of the US, Israel and Saudi Arabia is an unstoppable force in the Middle East. Trump's bought into this view hook, line and sinker, which is why he's willing to go all in on such a foolish showdown with Iran. I'm going to take the complete other side of that view, and assert that a more aggressive posture against Iran in the Middle East will lead to another huge fail, sparking a more serious collapse in the US empire and ultimately Iranian domination of the region. Crazy, you say? I also heard Brexit had no shot and that Trump couldn't win. When it comes to conventional wisdom at this point in the historical cycle, I want to be short. Why do I think this? First of all, the US simply doesn't have the position it thinks it has in the world any longer. The moral authority, irrespective of whether it was ever deserved in the first place, is gone. Disastrous and bloody wars based on lies and media propaganda have been exposed for the world to see, and many allies won't be willing to go along with an unnecessary Saudi-Israeli submission against Iran. Empires always make increasingly stupid decisions toward the end, driven by hubris and a lack of self-awareness. The US is no different. Second, the US would be getting in bed with a complete and total lunatic when it comes to de facto Saudi leader MBS. Pretty much everything this guy touches turns to shite, with his campaign in Yemen and attempt to isolate Qatar being prime examples. Now with his mass arrests of Saudi princes and other powerful people family members. In a quest to firm his position, he's lost even more credibility in the region and created a slough of dangerous enemies, who will never forget what he did to them. And remember to never humiliate a Bedouin in public. pic.twitter.com Upayazip, Nassim Nicholas Talib at Nintalib November 10, 2017. MBS is far, far weaker both internally and externally than he realizes. He thinks he's this grand figure who's destined to bring glory to himself and Saudi Arabia in the region, but he'll end up accomplishing the exact opposite. In addition to all the dangerous mistakes I've already mentioned, he recently made the biggest mistake of all by bringing the Saudi-Israeli alliance public for the world to see. Here's a little snippet from an NBC News article published last month to give you a little sense of what's going on for Israel. Saudi Arabia's growing willingness to confront Iranian influence in the Middle East presents an opening for an awkward alliance. As the kingdom's dynamic new crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, tries to rally an anti-Iran coalition, Israel, with the blessing of the Trump administration, is presenting itself as a willing and able partner. The appetite for cooperation between two of America's closest allies in the Middle East has grown in recent years, as their security interests have dovetailed. Both Israel and Saudi Arabia view Iran's growing influence in the region as an existential threat and want to squash militant Islamist groups like ISIS and Iran's main proxy, Hezbollah. A U.S. official who witnessed a Saudi and Israeli official hold a closed-door meeting together recently said such informal meetings have been taking place for at least 5 years. Remember, MBS has an undeservedly huge head and thinks of himself as some brilliant strategician. He thinks by publicly cozying up to Israel he'll gain the total support and blessing of the Trump administration for whatever insane crusade his twisted mind can envision. In that sense, he's correct, but I'm of the opinion he loses a lot more than he gains by going down this route. Everything this princeling does is short-sighted and driven by impulsive arrogance. He just gave the biggest gift possible to Iran by becoming close to Israel, because the average person on the street in the region will see this as a massive betrayal. The Iranian leadership gets this. As Reuters reported, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani urged Muslims on Tuesday to disrupt what he called a plot by unnamed countries in the region to build ties with Israel. He gave no more details on the states, but an Israeli cabinet minister said last month that his government had covered contacts with Saudi Arabia linked to their common concerns over Tehran. Some regional Islamic countries have shamelessly revealed their closeness to the Zionist regime Israel, Rouhani said in a speech broadcast live by state TV. I am sure that the Muslims around the world will not let this sinister plot bear fruit. This entire thing is setting up to be the graveyard of the U.S. empire. Recall what I wrote in my October post. It's sad to say it, but over the course of the 21st century the U.S. government has exposed itself as a corrupt bully, not just to the outside world, but also to its own people. Moreover, those in positions of power and influence in America either don't recognize this reality or don't care. It's this sort of disconnected hubris combined with rampant internal corruption that is the true graveyard of empires. I think both allies and enemies abroad have had enough, and given the right opportunity, will let the U.S. sink. With that in mind, read the following from Reuters. France rejected the unilateral decision while appealing for calm in the region. Britain said the move would not help peace efforts and Jerusalem should ultimately be shared by Israel and a future Palestinian state. Germany said Jerusalem's status could only be resolved on the basis of a two-state solution. Trump upended decades of U.S. policy in defiance of warnings from around the world that the gesture risks aggravating conflict in the tinderbox Middle East. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, a pre-recorded speech, said Jerusalem was the eternal capital of the state of Palestine, and that Trump's move was tantamount to the United States abdicating its role as a peace mediator. Lebanese President Michel Aoun said Trump's Jerusalem decision was dangerous and threatened the credibility of the United States as a broker of Middle East peace. He said the move would put back the peace process by decades and threatened regional stability and perhaps global stability. Qatar's foreign minister, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani, said Trump's undertaking was a death sentence for all who seek peace, and called it a dangerous escalation. Turkey said Trump's move was irresponsible. Iran seriously condemns Trump's move as it violates UN resolutions on the Israel-Palestinian conflict, state media reported. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said earlier in the day that the United States was trying to destabilize the region and start a war to protect Israel's security. If the decision on Jerusalem ends up inflaming the region in a major way, the entire world will see Trump and the U.S. as directly responsible. This will further the perception amongst allies that the U.S. is a global problem, and raise the likelihood that any military adventure in the region instigated by the U.S., Saudi Arabia and Israel will fail spectacularly. This trio will increasingly look like an alliance of rogue states to most of humanity. While I'm already sufficiently concerned about the likelihood of another stupid escalation in the Middle East by Trump, there are milestones I'm looking out for to let me know it's about to get really bad. At the core of A major disaster will be Senator Tom Cotton, a rabid neocon who I unequivocally believe is the most dangerous, anti-freedom person in the U.S. Congress. He reminds me of an American Mohammed bin Salman, and his elevated prominence around Trump earlier this year is what got me increasingly concerned in the first place. If Cotton takes on a more senior role in the Trump administration, such as a rumored position as CIA director, you can bet the farm that U.S. foreign policy is about to take the most dangerous turn since George W. Bush. Tom Cotton is a neocon on steroids, and seems to genuinely love conflict and authoritarianism. To get a better sense of what sort of person he is, take a look at him taking Twitter legal counsel to task. He believes U.S. companies act as an active arm of state intelligence. If that doesn't send a shiver down your spine, I don't know what will. Tom Cotton policy on anything represents a guaranteed nightmare for America and its people. If Trump promotes him in any way, prepare for almost unimaginable foreign policy disaster. If you liked this article and enjoy my work, consider becoming a monthly patron, or visit our support page to show your appreciation for independent content creators.